we should have to take it to Ferrari afterwards to get it absolutely finalised. It's over to you two now. It's us! Today we're going to be fixing the Ferrari.
Nobody expected a damaged Ferrari sitting quietly inside a garage in Leicester to become the center of one of the biggest automotive stories on YouTube. At first glance, it looked like just another crashed supercar waiting for expensive repairs. But hidden beneath its broken body panels and silent engine was a mystery that would eventually pull back the curtain on one of the most powerful car companies in the world. What started as a simple rebuild project soon turned into a battle between a determined YouTuber and a global automotive giant. Even more surprising, the story would eventually involve a former Ferrari insider whose actions sent shockwaves to the car community. The moment people heard that someone connected to Ferrari's technical world had walked away and started helping Matt Armstrong, questions exploded across the internet. Why would an engineer leave one of the most respected brands in automotive history? What had he seen behind the scenes? And what exactly did he reveal that had everyone talking? To understand why this story became so important, we need to go back to the beginning. Long before the headlines, long before the rumors, and long before Ferrari finally responded, there was simply a wrecked Ferrari 296 GTB sitting thousands of miles away in Cyprus. The car had been involved in a serious accident after its owner lost control. The damage was severe. Parts of suspension were destroyed, body panels were crushed, wiring was damaged, and the future of the car looked hopeless. When experts examined it, the conclusion was brutal. Repairing the vehicle through official channels would cost an enormous amount of money, and many believed the project simply wasn't worth attempting. For most people, that would have been the end of the story. The car would have been sold for parts, forgotten, and eventually replaced by another Ferrari rolling off the production line. But Matt Armstrong has never been like most people. Over the years, he built a reputation by taking vehicles that others consider beyond saving and bringing them back to life. His audience had watched him tackle projects that seemed impossible, and each success made him more determined to push further. So when he looked at the damaged Ferrari, he didn't see a lost cause. He saw a challenge. He saw an opportunity to prove that determination, creativity, and hard work could achieve what many experts said could not be done. At first, everything seemed to follow the familiar pattern of his previous rebuilds. Damaged parts were removed. Replacement components were sourced. Panels were repaired. Progress was made. Slowly but surely, the Ferrari began looking like a car again instead of a pile of expensive scrap metal. Viewers watched every step, expecting another incredible comeback story. But then something strange happened. As the project moved closer to completion, the Ferrari refused to cooperate. Despite all the work that had been done, despite the countless hours spent rebuilding it, the car would not start. What seemed like a simple technical issue soon revealed itself to be something far more complicated. The problem wasn't a broken bolt, a damaged sensor, or a missing component. It was buried deep inside the vehicle's advanced hybrid systems and software architecture. Suddenly, the project transformed from a rebuild into an investigation. Every failed attempt raised new questions. Every solution led to another obstacle. And with each passing week, Matt Armstrong found himself facing an enemy that couldn't be fixed with tools alone. What nobody realized at the time was that this silent Ferrari was about to expose a much bigger conversation about ownership, control, technology, and the future of modern cars. And somewhere behind the scenes, an individual with insider knowledge was watching everything unfold, waiting for the moment when he would decide to step forward and change the story forever. As the rebuild continued, excitement slowly turned into frustration. The Ferrari was beginning to look incredible on the outside. Fresh body panels replaced damaged ones. New paint transformed its appearance. Custom upgrades made it look even more aggressive than when it left the factory. To anyone walking into the garage, it appeared that the hardest part of the project was already finished. But appearances can be deceiving. Underneath the shiny exterior, the Ferrari remained completely lifeless. Every time Matt and his team thought they were getting closer to a breakthrough, another obstacle appeared. The engine refused to start. The hybrid system refused to cooperate. The expensive machine sat silently in the workshop, as if it were protecting a secret nobody could unlock. At first, the team approached the problem like any normal repair. They checked wiring, connectors, sensors, and modules. They searched through technical information and spoke with specialists. But the deeper they investigated, the clearer it became that this wasn't a normal mechanical problem. The Ferrari 296 GTB represented a new generation of supercars, one where software controlled nearly everything. Unlike older vehicles that could often be repaired with experience and determination, this Ferrari depended on a complex network of computers constantly communicating with one another. If even one critical system refused to give permission, the entire vehicle could remain disabled. It was like trying to open a vault when only the manufacturer had the key. This realization marked a turning point in the project. For the first time, Matt wasn't fighting damaged metal or broken parts. He was fighting invisible software. The challenge became even more frustrating because the physical rebuild itself had been a success. The car had survived a devastating crash and had been brought back from the edge of destruction. Yet despite all that progress, a few lines of code appeared capable of stopping everything. Naturally, the next step was to seek help from Ferrari. After all, if anyone understood the system, it would be the company that created it. But what happened next shocked both Matt and his audience. Instead of receiving support, he was met with resistance. The message seemed clear. Because the car had been rebuilt outside Ferrari's official repair network and had undergone modifications, the company was unwilling to simply step in and solve the problem. For viewers watching the story unfold online, this was the moment the rebuild became much bigger than a single car project. Suddenly, the conversation wasn't just about a Ferrari that wouldn't start. It became a debate about ownership itself. If someone legally buys a car, spends months repairing it, and owns every part of it, should a manufacturer still have the power to prevent it from functioning? That question began appearing everywhere in comment sections, forums, and social media discussions. Meanwhile, Matt refused to give up. Every setback only seemed to strengthen his determination. He continued searching for answers, contacting experts, and exploring possibilities that most people would never consider. Then came one of the most painful moments of the entire journey. Believing the hybrid battery system might be responsible for the problem, the team invested more than $20,000 into a replacement solution. It was an enormous gamble. If it worked, the Ferrari could finally roar back to life. If it failed, thousands of dollars would disappear with nothing to show for it. The pressure was enormous. Viewers watched anxiously as the new components were installed. Everyone hoped this would be the breakthrough they had been waiting for. But when the moment of truth arrived, disappointment hit hard. The Ferrari still refused to start. $20,000 had vanished, yet the car remained silent. For many people, that would have been the point where they walked away. Months of work, huge expenses, and constant frustration would have been enough to convince anyone that the project was impossible. But Matt Armstrong had built his reputation on refusing to accept impossible. What nobody knew was that somewhere behind the scenes, events were already beginning to move. While millions of viewers watched the public struggle, conversations were taking place inside Ferrari's world. And before long, one unexpected individual would step out of that world and into Matt Armstrong's garage, bringing knowledge that could change everything. By this stage, the Ferrari rebuild had become far more than a YouTube project. What started as an ambitious attempt to rescue a crashed supercar was now turning into a public showdown between determination and corporate control. Every new video attracted hundreds of thousands of viewers. Some tuned in because they love Ferraris. Others came for the engineering challenge. But a growing number of people were watching because they wanted to see who would win. Would a YouTuber working from a garage succeed where official channels had declared the project impossible? Or would one of the world's most famous automotive companies prove that certain vehicles simply could not be rebuilt without their involvement? The tension continued to grow with every upload. Then Matt made a decision that surprised many people. Instead of simply trying to restore the Ferrari to its original condition, he decided to take the project in an entirely new direction. If Ferrari wasn't willing to help him create a standard road-going 296 GTB, he would build something even more unique. His attention turned toward the Ferrari 296 Challenge, a race-focused version of the car designed specifically for competition. These weren't ordinary aftermarket upgrades that anyone could order online. The Challenge components were specialized factory racing parts developed for Ferrari's own motorsport programs. Installing them would completely transform the appearance and character of the vehicle. It was an ambitious idea, but ambition had always been part of Matt Armstrong's formula. At first, things appeared to be moving smoothly. Some parts were successfully ordered and delivered. Excitement returned to the workshop as the team began planning how the race-inspired components would fit onto the rebuilt Ferrari. But then another unexpected obstacle appeared. Certain parts suddenly became difficult to obtain. Orders that once seemed straightforward now faced restrictions. Questions were asked. Authorizations were required. In some cases, parts appeared tied directly to specific vehicle identification numbers. The message was clear. Ferrari closely monitored where certain components were going and how they were being used. For Matt, this created yet another challenge. The project was no longer just about fixing a damaged car. It was about building something that Ferrari itself had never intended to exist. The technical difficulties were enormous. The race car and the road car shared similarities, but they were not identical. Cooling systems differed. Aerodynamics differed. Structural details differed. Components designed for one configuration didn't always fit another. Rather than giving up, Matt and his team did what they had done throughout the entire rebuild. They adapted. They fabricated custom solutions. They modified parts. They solved problems one at a time. Every new obstacle required creativity, patience, and countless hours of work. Yet each solution pushed the project further away from a traditional Ferrari restoration and closer to becoming a one-of-a-kind machine. For viewers, this was fascinating. They weren't simply watching a repair anymore. They were witnessing the creation of something unique. But hidden beneath the excitement was a deeper issue that continued to haunt the project. No matter how impressive the modifications became, none of them would matter if the software barriers remained in place. The car still needed to function. It still needed permission from systems that seemed determined to keep it silent. As discussions about restricted parts and software controls spread online, the Ferrari story began attracting attention from people far beyond Matt's usual audience. Automotive enthusiasts, mechanics, engineers, and right-to-repair advocates all started paying attention. Many saw the Ferrari as a symbol of a much larger problem. Modern vehicles were becoming increasingly dependent on proprietary software, manufacturer control systems, and restricted access. The more advanced the technology became, the less freedom owners seemed to have. What happened with one Ferrari in a Leicester garage suddenly felt relevant to millions of drivers around the world. And then, just when the project appeared stuck between progress and failure, something happened that nobody expected. Behind the scenes, someone with first-hand knowledge of Ferrari's technical systems had been watching the entire story unfold. He understood the architecture. He understood the software. He understood the very systems that had turned this rebuild into a nightmare. More importantly, he had reached a point where he no longer wanted to remain silent. Soon, his arrival would introduce a new chapter in the story, one filled with revelations, controversy, and questions that Ferrari would rather not answer. For months, the story seemed simple on the surface. A determined YouTuber was fighting against technical problems while trying to bring a wrecked Ferrari back to life. Millions of viewers watched every setback, every failed attempt, and every small victory. But behind the scenes, something much bigger was happening. Inside Ferrari's technical world, people were paying attention. Engineers, technicians, and specialists who understood the company's systems better than almost anyone else were watching Matt Armstrong's videos just like everyone else. They saw a man rebuilding a car that many believed should have been impossible to save. They saw him spending thousands of dollars searching for answers. They saw him repeatedly hit a wall that seemed impossible to break through. And while the public only saw the struggle on camera, some people inside the industry saw something else. They saw a growing conflict between traditional car ownership and modern software control technology. Among those observers was an individual whose knowledge made him different from ordinary viewers. This wasn't a random mechanic commenting online. This wasn't a fan sharing theories in a forum. According to the story, this was someone who had spent years working within Ferrari's technical network. He understood the systems. He understood the software architecture. He understood the communication between the vehicle's electronic modules and the hybrid management systems. Most importantly, he understood exactly why the Ferrari remained silent despite all the work that had been done to it. As Matt continued documenting every obstacle, this insider reportedly became increasingly uncomfortable with what he was seeing. From his perspective, the situation represented more than a repair problem. It represented philosophy. Modern vehicles, especially high-end hybrid supercars, were increasingly designed around the assumption that manufacturers would always remain involved. The systems expected factory oversight. They expected authorized service networks. They expected official procedures. When those expectations were broken, the systems often became difficult or even impossible for independent owners to manage. For some people inside the industry, this was perfectly reasonable. They argued that such controls protected safety, reliability, and brand reputation. But for others, the situation raised difficult questions. If a customer legally owned a vehicle, should software be allowed to prevent them from using it? If someone rebuilt a car with their own money and effort, should they still need permission from a manufacturer to make it function? These debates were growing louder across the automotive world, and the Ferrari project was becoming one of the most visible examples. Then came the moment that would change everything. According to the narrative surrounding the rebuild, the insider decided he had seen enough. Rather than remain on the sidelines, he chose to step forward. The image itself sounded almost unbelievable. A person with real knowledge of Ferrari's internal systems walking into a YouTuber's garage and offering to help solve one of the most famous automotive mysteries on the internet. For viewers, it felt like something out of a movie. The struggling hero finally meets someone who understands the hidden rules of the game. Suddenly, hope returned. If anyone could explain what was happening, surely it would be someone who knew the systems from the inside. But the significance went beyond technical knowledge. The engineers' reported involvement added credibility to many of the concerns people had been discussing. If someone familiar with Ferrari's world was willing to walk away and share his expertise elsewhere, what did that say about the issues surrounding modern vehicle control? The questions began spreading rapidly. What exactly had he revealed? How much control did manufacturers truly have over their vehicles after they were sold? And could the same problems eventually affect ordinary drivers, not just owners of exotic supercars? As speculation intensified, the rebuild entered its most fascinating stage yet. The mystery was no longer simply about a Ferrari that would not start. It was becoming a story about technology, ownership, freedom, and the future of the automotive industry itself. The answers that were about to emerge would challenge assumptions held by car enthusiasts around the world and force people to reconsider what it really means to own a modern vehicle. And for Ferrari, the attention surrounding these questions was becoming impossible to ignore. The more people learned about the Ferrari rebuild, the more they realized that the real battle was not happening with wrenches, welding equipment, or replacement parts. The real battle was taking place inside a network of computers hidden beneath the bodywork. Modern supercars are no longer just machines made of metal and engineering. They are rolling computers, packed with software that controls everything from performance and safety systems to battery management and power delivery. According to the insider's reported explanation, Ferrari's hybrid architecture was designed around a very specific assumption. Ferrari itself would always remain part of the process. The systems were built to communicate with authorized tools, authorized technicians, and authorized service networks. Under normal circumstances, this structure worked well. Owners could take their vehicles to Ferrari dealerships. Technicians could diagnose problems. Software updates could be installed. And repairs could be completed according to factory standards. But when a vehicle stepped outside that system, things became far more complicated. A major crash, extensive rebuilding, or modifications performed outside official channels could create situations the software was never designed to comfortably accept. This was where Matt Armstrong's Ferrari found itself. From the outside, the car looked increasingly complete. Yet inside, electronic systems continued behaving as though something was wrong. According to the story, the engineer explained that the issue wasn't simply a broken component refusing to function. Instead, the architecture itself was designed to be cautious, restrictive, and heavily dependent on factory-level validation. In simple terms, the car wanted confirmation that everything met Ferrari's expectations before it would fully cooperate. To many viewers, this sounded shocking. After all, people generally assume that when they buy a car, they own it completely. They believe ownership means the freedom to repair, modify, and maintain the vehicle however they choose. But modern technology has complicated that idea. Increasingly, software determines what a vehicle can and cannot do. In some cases, software can even prevent hardware from functioning properly if certain conditions are not met. Suddenly, Matt's Ferrari was no longer just an unusual rebuild project. It had become a symbol of a growing debate taking place throughout the automotive industry. Supporters of manufacturers argued that these controls existed for good reasons. High-performance hybrid systems are incredibly complex. Incorrect repairs could create safety risks. Unauthorized modifications might affect reliability or performance. Companies also have legal responsibilities and reputations to protect. From that perspective, strict software oversight made sense. But critics saw things differently. They argued that excessive control effectively reduced ownership rights. If a customer spends hundreds of thousands of dollars on a vehicle, should a manufacturer still maintain the power to restrict access to critical functions? Should software become a gatekeeper standing between owners and their own property? These questions were no longer theoretical. Millions of viewers were watching a real-world example play out on YouTube. Every setback experienced by Matt Armstrong seemed to reinforce concerns that modern vehicles were becoming increasingly dependent on manufacturer approval. The engineer's reported comments added even more fuel to the discussion. According to the narrative, he suggested that what people were seeing wasn't an accident or an unexpected flaw. Instead, it was a natural result of how modern systems had been designed. The architecture wasn't broken. It was functioning exactly as intended. For some viewers, that idea was more unsettling than any mechanical failure. A broken part can be repaired. A damaged component can be replaced. But when software itself becomes the obstacle, solutions become much harder to find. As these revelations spread across forums, social media, and automotive communities, the Ferrari rebuild evolved into something much larger than anyone originally imagined. What began as the story of one damaged supercar was becoming a public conversation about technology, ownership, repair rights, and the future of transportation. And while the debate continued to grow, Matt Armstrong remained focused on a single goal: getting the Ferrari running. The question now was whether the knowledge provided by the insider would finally help unlock the solution that months of effort, thousands of dollars, and countless hours of work had failed to achieve. The answer would determine not only the fate of the Ferrari, but also the next chapter in one of YouTube's most talked about automotive stories.